All right, welcome to our continued lesson from class today on how to create histograms. And if you remember when we talked in class, we talked about the difference between a bar graph and a histogram, that a histogram is a type of bar graph, but it's a special type. And if you look at the examples that are pictured here, you'll notice that on a bar graph, we have categories here. And on the histogram, we actually have ranges. So this would be considered 100 to 150, 150 to 200, and so on and so forth. The other big difference is this one has gaps in between the bars, and this one has no gaps, because these are intervals, and the intervals are showing continuous data. So that's why the bars are constantly touching, because the information is connected and related to each other. So if we continue to go on, our SWOT hasn't changed. We have to construct and analyze or study and understand histograms, and then be able to compare and contrast the histograms with other types of graphs that represent the information from the same kind of data. So if we look at how to make a histogram, I already have the things in here for you. So I'm using NBA wins because it's March Madness, or wrapping up the season. So and basketball playoffs, whatever. So there are 29 teams, and we have the scores. They've done a frequency table and tallied it for you. So right here is our frequency table, and that shows you how the data is going to be related and dispersed from within each interval. So step one is to draw and label. That's this right here. Draw and label the horizontal, which is this right here, the wins, and the vertical axis, and this is always the frequency, but you can be more specific. It's the frequency of wins, or the frequency of teams that have won by these scores. And then once you've done that, then you're going to title it. And this has already been titled for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Let me get a highlighter here. So here's our title. Here's our axis titles. And the only thing that we have left to do is, we have to create the scale over here. And I can see that my highest frequency is 10, so I need to go all the way up to 10. So if this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when you're drawing them, try to keep them as equal as possible, and then go ahead and label them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so now we're going to take the data sets from the table and convert it into the histogram. So our first one, from 11 to 20, that interval has 3. So I'm going to draw a bar that is the height of 3, and then I'll just color it in. And then my second one, 21 to 30, is 4. So I'm going to draw all the way up to 4. Try to be as close to 4 as possible. Don't be over. And the next one is 31 to 40, which is also 4. And then our big daddy, 41 to 50, which is 10. So I'm going to go all the way up to 10. That would be considered our mode. And then our last one is 8. So sometimes it's hard when you get to the end. Okay, now, because it's hard to sometimes read these, it's always easier if you say, okay, well, this is 3, this is 4, this is 4, this is 10, and this is 8. Because then when you go to answer questions about them, then you can easily see what each bar represents. So that's just a little trick that would help you as you answer these questions. Okay, so now this is your turn. I obviously can't have you do this, so we're going to skip this and do this. No, we'll go ahead and take the notes. Okay, so this is the speed of cars on a stretch of interstate clocked by a police officer that have been organized into a frequency table. So here's our intervals. So our intervals are going to go on our x-axis, and our frequency is going to go on our, oops, sorry, that should be a y. That's our y. So here's the frequency, and you could say of cars, or you could just leave it at frequency. And then down here on the x, these are our speeds. And we're going to go ahead and create, we have 4 of them, so we're going to create 4 equally sized intervals. So then we can label them. This is going to be 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, and 80 to 89. And those are all coming straight from the table. And then again, we have to look, our highest is going to be 18. So I'm going to count by 2s this time. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Okay, so again, I'm counting by 2s. And then we have to come up with a title. So based on what the information that's given to me, I would say speed of cars on interstate. You don't even have to include interstate. You could just say the speed of cars, but I like to include that because that is specific in the question. Okay, so now all we have to do is show the frequency based on our intervals. So our first one, from 50 to 59, there were 2 cars. So we're going to draw that bar. And again, these are intervals and they are connected because the speeds are all continuous. So our next one was 14. 14 cars were going between 60 and 69 miles per hour. And then our next one, people going on the interstate 70 to 79 miles per hour is 18, so that's all the way to the top. And then our last one, there were only 3 people, thank goodness, going between 80 and 89, and that's about halfway between 2 and 4, so you'll have to eyeball that one. So that's what your graph should look like. Don't forget, the important pieces are making sure that when you're reading histograms, you're looking at the titles, but also knowing that these bars represent how many cars were going those speeds. That's what frequency means. How many times did it happen? Okay, so let's look at the flip side. This is being able to analyze and answer questions about a histogram. So if you look at this first one, which interval, the question says, which interval represents the most number of quarts? Well, if you see most number of quarts, well, here's the number of quarts. So we're looking at which one's the highest on this side. So that would be this one right here, which is 19,000 to 1999 seats. So that's the combination of seats that's in the most quarts, if that makes sense what that question's asking. Number 2 says how many quarts have less than 20,000 seats. So again, my hints, go ahead and write the numbers that each bar represents. So this means 1 quart. This 17,000 to 17,099 is about 3 quarts because it's halfway between 2 and 4. This one's about 4 quarts. This one is 12 quarts. This one is 6 quarts. And these are all 1. Okay, so that's just a cheat to help us as we answer these questions. So this next question says, how many quarts have less than 20,000 seats? So 20,000 seats is right here. Here's the cutoff. So we're saying all of these have less than 20,000 seats. So you're going to count them. You're going to have 12 plus 4 plus 3 plus 1. And that's where we get our answer. Our answer is 20 quarts. So here is the first number represents my 16,000 to 16,099 and going all the way up until we reach the 20,000 mark. How many quarts have between 17,000 and 19,000? So that means we're looking at, instead of looking at this range, we're now just looking between these two, oops, not even that far. So we are looking right here. So that includes this one and this one. So in order to figure that out, all we have to do is add those together. 3 plus 4, the frequencies. 3 plus 4 equals 7 quarts. The next one says how many quarts are represented on the graph. Well, remember number of quarts is right here. So you're counting the number or how high each bar is. So we're going to add all of them together. 1 plus 3 plus 4 plus 12 plus 6 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. And when you do all that, that tells you how many quarts are represented on the graph. And the answer is 29 quarts. I'm going through this pretty fast. So if you need to, you can pause the video and go ahead and record the answers. But make sure you're recording not just the answers, but how I got the answers so that you have them for your notes so you understand where I'm coming from. The last one says how many courts have at least 21,000 seats. 21,000 seats are right here. So you're looking at this group. Well, there's one for this one for this one, and one for this one. So to find our answer, we would simply add 1 plus 1 plus 1, which gives me 3. So that's how you use a histogram. Remember I said the disadvantage of a histogram is I don't know individual data. So I can't look at this bar and say, okay, how many quarts have exactly 19,500? Because 19,500 falls smack in the middle of this, and I don't know what each number represents. And I can't even make a guess because it could be all over the place. Okay, let's look at these questions. This one says, on a new graph, we're now looking at the winning scores for the first 36 Super Bowls. So this tells me automatically that there have been 36 Super Bowls. So if I add these up, I should get 36. Here's 4. This one is 13, 14, 3, and 2. So if I add those up, I do in fact get 36 total. And I know that because it's also in the title of the graph. So down here represents the winning scores, and this tells me how many of the games or Super Bowls were played that fall within those winning scores. So if we look, saying this number 6 says how big is each interval, we're talking about how many numbers. So let's take the first interval that I see, 10 to 19. And if I listed out every single one of those numbers that's in that interval, and then I counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That tells me that there are 10 numbers in each interval. And I don't have to count the rest of them because I know by definition a histogram has the same length or the same interval for each one. So if you look, they all start with a number that ends in a 0, and they all end in a number with a 9. So we know that they're all the same pattern, which tells me they're all the same size as far as how many numbers are contained in each interval. The next one says what is the percentage of winning Super Bowl games in the 10 to 19 interval? Well, there were 4 of them, but they're asking for the percentage. So you have to say 4 out of how many? Well, there were 36 total games. So then to do that, we divide 4 divided by 36. And I get 0.111111111 repeating. And we multiply by 100. And that gives me 11.1%. Sorry, that moved on you. So that is your final answer, 11.1%. The last question says how many winning teams score less than 30 points? So let's go back up to our graph. I'm going to use green just so it's clear. Here's the 30-point mark. So how many of them score less? Well, these are my 2 intervals that it counts for, but I'm looking at how tall are each bar. So if I look, there's 4 games here, and there's 13 games here, so I have to add those together. 4 plus 13, and I get 17 games. All right, the last question It's a pretty easy question, but this could be an easy technology enhanced question or a TEI question that you might see on your SOL. It says, here are 4 intervals. Which one is not equal to the other 3? So if I look, the first one is 12 to 16. And again, I could count on my fingers, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And when I'm done, I hold up 5 fingers. So there's 5 numbers in that interval. If you go ahead and do that for each one, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, that's 6 numbers. Hold up your fingers for the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 numbers. And the last one, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. We also have 5 numbers. So on this one, which one is not like the others? I would say that this interval is not like the others. And to justify my answer, I would say 20 to 25 is different. And that would be because it contains 6 numbers in the interval, and all the others only contain 5. So that's an easy way to say, look at these, find which one's different. And they might do something like that because it could be find the 3 other that are the same, and you have to click more than one answer. Okay? So that's an easy way to think. Count on your fingers, don't just subtract. If you subtract, you're going to get 4, which is wrong because there's actually 5 numbers. You have to include both 12 and 16 as being part of the data set. All right, we're going to go through a couple of these, and then these are in your notes. This is, let me tell you exactly which page. This is page 39. We're going to do this one really quick, and then you are going to do page 40 for your Edmodo quiz, just some of the questions. So if we look, we have 2 graphs up here. One is showing birthdays of students by the month, and the other one is showing the final scores on an assessment. So the graph on your left, graph A, is a bar graph because we have categories at the bottom and there are spaces between my bars. And the graph B is final scores on an assessment or on a test, and it's showing the intervals 20 to 30%, 30 to 40%, and all the way up to 100%. So on graph B, they're asking for the independent variable. The independent variable is this down here. So what would that be? That would be your final scores, or the percentages, or final scores. Any of that would work. On graph A, they're asking how many more students were born in May than July. So look at May. May is 7. And July is 4. So in order to find that, you do 7 minus 4, and your answer is 3. So if we look at skip number A, because I want to get on through here and not make your video too long, on graph B, how many students did not pass the test? To not pass, you had to get 60% or less. Well, here's my 60% cutoff. Remember, my cheat tells you to go ahead and write down how many students each one represents. So how many total students? 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2. That would give you 6. So 6 students failed. And if you can keep going and answer those questions on number 5, it says how many more students received a B than an A. Well, our Bs are 80s to 90s. These are our Bs and these are our As. So how many more students got a B? B is all the way up here at 13 and A's are at 5. So you would do 13 minus 5 and your answer should be 8 students. Okay, the other one has to do with a line graph, but we're not going to go over that since that doesn't have to do with histograms, and your SOL is actually histograms. But you're more than welcome to look at that and be able to compare that. But we're not going to go over that right now on the video. So for your Edmodo quiz, I want you to plan to do page 40 and answer the questions at the top of the page. We are going to, I'll give you multiple choice answers and we'll go over them in class. Don't forget your test is going to be on Friday.